is that defenders of greater and greater government power do one of two things to justify that power. Number one is they try and exploit the fear of Americans by ratcheting up the talk of terrorism and saying that unless you give the power to the government, you will be killed by terrorists. The second thing they do is they mislead American people about what has been going on. That's true with Iraq, it's true with torture, and it's true with the answer that he just gave about what this law does. You asked him, does this law enable simply foreign-to-foreign calls to be eavesdropped on, or if you're calling from Indianapolis to London, can they listen in, or if you're emailing a friend in England, can they read your emails without a warrant? And he basically ignored your question and said, oh, it's mostly foreign-to-foreign. Everybody agrees that foreign-to-foreign calls do not need a warrant. The Democrats were willing to change FISA so that no warrants were required. That is not what this debate is about. Pakistan to Afghanistan, no warrants. What this law does is say that every single international communication, emails from Indianapolis to London, phone calls from Miami to France, those conversations, those emails can now be listened in by George Bush and the National Security Agency with nobody knowing what they're doing, with no warrant required, with no judicial oversight. That is exactly the situation that for decades has led to abuses, and it is fundamentally contrary to the entire system of government that the founders created, which is we do not trust government leaders with vast and awesome power to be exercised in secret. We have a system of checks and balances, and we only trust our government leaders to eavesdrop on us and to engage in surveillance with oversight. This law gives vast powers to listen in on our conversations and read our emails with no connection to terrorism, with no proof that anyone has ever done anything wrong. And it is an extremely dangerous situation, and it is vast and overwhelming.
Let's get a phone call in here. Dallas, Republican line, your first phone call. Good morning.
Good morning. I don't know whether people are afraid to tell you the truth because they can't reveal secrets, but there's a program that was enacted under Clinton that does everything that we're talking about. It's called Echelon. That's open source and that's public, so you guys can talk about that, but that's all we've been talking about this whole debate for the last few years. The question is, NSA records every international conversation, every single one, and they also hear every domestic call that goes over wires and wireless. They're all recorded. Now, either the Democrats are just playing partisan games and we're reinstituting an old program that dates back to Clinton, or we're now listening to Americans' conversations and recording all those too. Y'all can't tell us the truth because you'd be exposing secrets. The media doesn't know what the heck's been said in open source, so they won't even tell us about Echelon, which is an old program. I don't know whether this is partisan games or whether this program has taken vast new sweeping intrusions into our personal security of American citizens. Probably all American international calls were recorded previously.
Let's get a response from both of our guests. Is this a reinstatement of an old law?
No, and the reason is even the Bush administration admits that ever since 1978 when FISA was enacted, it is the only administration to eavesdrop on the telephone calls of Americans without warrants in violation of that law. But the caller does raise one critical point, which is what has been going on under the Bush presidency has been done behind a virtually impenetrable wall of secrecy. James Comey was here at the Capitol 2 months ago, and he said that what he and John Ashcroft discovered in 2004 that the government was doing was so patently illegal, so unconscionable, that he and Director Mueller of the FBI and John Ashcroft all agreed that if this behavior didn't cease immediately, that they were going to resign from the Bush government en masse. We do not know what those activities are that prompted such an extraordinary reaction on the part of high-level Bush lawyers at the Department of Justice. We don't know most of what has been going on in terms of how this government has been spying on us. The Congress has no idea, in fact, what they just passed in terms of the power that it gives. And I think the caller is right. Most of our government now operates behind a wall of secrecy, and that is an extraordinary problem for a democracy.
Mr. Rivkin?
Scaremongering is not a useful way, with all due respect, to wage a debate. Almost everything you say with due respect is untrue. As to secrecy, Bush administration, from the very beginning, after it adopted terrorist surveillance program in the aftermath of September 11, briefed that program, the so-called Gang of Eight. So members of Congress, Republican and Democrats in both Senate and House Intelligence Committees and the House and Senate leaderships were involved in that. That's a fact. There's no dispute about it. Point number one. With regard to a new law, as you all know, it brings the FISA court more into foreign intercepts than ever before. Only purely foreign-to-foreign conversations are exempt from judicial review. We now have in place And again, to answer your question very precisely, in a situation where somebody's calling from Indianapolis, let's say Peshawar, Pakistan, you would not be the one target of surveillance. Your phone number, your voicemail, your email would not trigger any surveillance regime. If the person you're calling and communicating in is a foreign terrorist or enrolled in a program for some reason, the surveillance, the call would be caught because of that. But that, as I've mentioned, I've not heard you rebut it, has always been the case. In 1979, in 1980, if you had a foreign individual calling the United States, if you look at the language of FISA and the call was intercepted overseas, because as a matter of technology, that's how it worked, because it was before fiber optics. Those calls were transmitted over the air. NSA satellites would have intercepted that call without any warrant whatsoever. We're talking about, we should be having a real serious debate about how to balance privacy with security. Not government security, security of American citizens. We're not talking about balancing privacy versus some alien interest of somebody from Mars. We're talking about our interest in being alive. And that's not a joke. That's not an idle threat. We've lost 3,000 Americans on September 11, and God forbid we're going to lose a lot more if we're blind and deaf. We should have a serious debate about it instead of engaging in scammongering to say that privacy, but look, let's be honest. There is a privacy interest even in that kind of foreign intercept, but it's a lot less, a lot different than in the situation where a target is an American person. And we should be honest about distinguishing those two situations instead of just repeating like a mantra, privacy interest, as if it trumps everything. You cannot lead a day in modern society. You cannot live without sacrificing some privacy in a commercial context, in the context of interacting with your government. We have to be reasonable about it. We have zero effort at serious debate. All we have sloganeering and bashing the Bush administration. And that's unfortunate.
District Heights, Maryland, you're our next phone call.
Good morning. I disagree with this law completely. We don't know what the Bush administration has been done. They tell so many lies. Can anybody believe anything that anyone in this administration, including Gonzalez, would say? I watch the History Channel a lot, and we're becoming the American Third Reich. How Hitler developed the Third Reich through fear and intimidation and lies. And this administration is the worst administration, I'm 70 years, worst administration in my lifetime. George Bush have broken every law in this country. He violated the Constitution. He violated the privacy of American citizens. He's broken international law. The Geneva Convention, he's tortured, he's lied, and I wouldn't believe a word out of that man's mouth.
Okay, caller, we got your point. Mr. Rivkin, has the Bush administration done an adequate job communicating to the American people the need for programs like this one?
Look, it's hard to reach soaring heights of Churchillian oratory in any administration. I would say the Bush administration has done an adequate job. Not a perfect job, but not a bad job communicating what's at stake. The difficulty we have is there's unfortunately such level of partisanship, such level of polarization, and such level of media hostility that it's just, you get drowned out. I mean, I don't even know what to tell a caller who starts from a proposition that we live in something resembling a Third Reich and Bush is another Hitler. It's hard to have a serious debate. I don't remember, I mean, sure, there's a lot of hostility during the Clinton administration, but it's not useful, okay? We have vigorous oversight system. We have vigorous involvement by Congress in all their issues. We have media that leaks, frankly, you know, I mean, there's no secret that survives. I call it bureaucratic checks and balances. There's no secret that survives for more than a couple of years in this administration or any other administration. So any notion that there's a serious levels of wrongdoing, you know, IRS audits for Alan Nixon for partisan advantage or Watergate stuff, it's just nonsense. But that's the impression people have, and it provides a difficult context which have serious debate.
Mr. Greenwald, your response?
I mean, he could say that it's hard to have a serious debate when a caller says we don't trust the Bush administration, but the fact of the matter is this country has seen the Bush administration over the last 6 years, and polls show overwhelmingly that the American people do not trust George Bush, do not believe that the things he says is the truth, and that begins with the Iraq War and goes forward. And I think what's critical to acknowledge here is Mr. Rivkin is a lawyer who almost always defends the Bush administration. I'm a critic of the Bush administration. But look at what the Bush administration's own lawyers in the Justice Department said. These are right-wing lawyers, John Ashcroft, James Comey. They said that the Bush administration, in the way they were spying on us, was breaking the law to such an extreme degree that they were all going to quit unless it stopped. Believe them. Or believe the only two federal judges in this country who have opined on what the administration is doing, who have both concluded emphatically that the administration was violating the law. FISA is a criminal law, that George Bush was breaking the law in the way that he has been spying on us over the last 4 years. These are indisputable facts that underlie this entire debate. This country does not trust George Bush, and therefore we shouldn't trust any political leaders to spy on us in secret. And that's the balance that we need. We want them to engage in eavesdropping, but only with judicial oversight.
We're talking about the